on display.
I think Bacon was very authentic in his self-invention. He was very conscious, I think literally conscious of his image in terms, you know, the guy used to wear makeup and dye his hair and, I mean, I've been told, I don't know if it's true, that he'd had a couple of facelifts. You know, on the most superficial level, he was interested in his image. We live in a time of images and image making. And Bacon in the post-war years coincides, you know, almost exactly with the advent of mass media. You know, I mean, he becomes a celebrity in this country in the sort of early 60s with colour supplements. Although he feigned this kind of distance from all of those things, he was absolutely party to it all. But it would be impossible to be an artist then and now and not play that game.
The moment he went out, he would take down one of his freshly pressed suits that he kept in cellophane, just to one side of the studio, and an impeccable shirt. I mean, he would dress like a very correct and prosperous banker. He hated the idea of looking bohemian, of looking arty. This was something that he felt that probably second-rate artists did. And then probably if he was going out for a long night in Soho, he might don rather more sinister gear, which would often made him look a little bit like a Nazi policeman or something. He'd have a big black leather overcoat. Everything very tight, with epaulettes and drawn in, almost as though he was tied up in his clothes. He did mention once how disgusted some people were when they found out that he was wearing female underclothes, knickers and fishnet stockings.
He wore very expensive wristwatches, and the point of very expensive wristwatches, I'm told, was that's a great signifier to rough trade that you've got money. It's also a very masculine form of jewellery, obviously. But, you know, to a piece of rough trade, they can clock an Oyster Rolex, you know, from 25 paces. It was a language of signals. And again, if we go back to pre-67, when homosexuality was illegal, those signs and signals were very important in communicating certain things.
For somebody coming from his background, which was an Irish gentry background, and living at the time he did when homosexuality was absolutely forbidden legally, this necessarily meant a clandestine existence. And it meant living in, so to speak, always in the twilight. If the one thing which really drives you forward, if your sexual urge is illegal, banned by society, other forms of illegality, other forms of lying, none of those begin to seem so serious. And I think that the result was that he was, I suspect, a person who didn't form certain kinds of social bond, certain kinds of bonds of affection, and whose attitude to the world surrounding him was always to some extent adversarial.
I don't believe in love, really. I mean, love is marvellous if it happens.
And I don't mean sexual love. I mean love of life, love of friends, love of...
Well, I would have said the sexual obsession was the strongest one. After that, what would
I
you
find
say?
it very overrated, but I've never experienced it as much as you have, Francis.
Oh, really? But I think there's only a sexual obsession.
Francis,
Am I saying that excitement is pleasure? If you're excited by something, it gives you pleasure.
Yes, you're correct.
Well, there it is. Excitement is pleasure.
I do sometimes, Francis, ask stupid questions in order to get...
Well, it's not my fault,
clever
is
reply.
it?
I know it isn't. But I do set myself up as...
In conversation,
Bacon appeared to be remarkably open, but at some level he always remained elusive. And while he was alive, it was often difficult to challenge his own words about his own art.
I wanted something to nail the figure to the bed, and it looked more logical with a hypodermic syringe. I couldn't put a nail through their arm, so it was much easier to put a hypodermic syringe.
He always denied that the syringes had anything to do with drugs. His denial that they had meaning is a kind of foot on. Are you going to go along with me? Are you sufficiently intimidated by me to swallow the story? Do you dare to contradict me? If you do dare to contradict me, am I going to throw you out of the restaurant where I am paying the bill?
Yes. Am I going to be the only one drinking?
For 30 years, the critic David Sylvester attempted to explain this difficult artist to the public. In their many interviews, both David Sylvester's questions and Bacon's answers remained remarkably consistent.
Critics divide into groupies and non-groupies. David is, and I don't say this unkindly, an absolute born groupie. He is somebody who loves to be seduced by an artistic personality. It's the most rarefied form of seduction. He loves the idea of being a kind of bride of Christ, as far as Bacon is concerned. Bacon knew that he had an absolutely sympathetic audience, an audience which was most unlikely to report anything which he, Bacon, didn't want reported. And this book of interviews has been the textbook of every ambitious art student that I know, that here is the mold, here is the type, not necessarily of the kind of art that student wants to make, but of the kind of person he would like to be. The laid-back, nihilistic, in-your-face, not taking no shit from no one, artist. That's why the Cool Britannia guys, this is why the Damien Hirsts and all that generation, they still make an icon of Bacon. They make an icon of Bacon not because of the work, but because of the personality. That's what they want to be. They'd love to be that. Gosh, they'd love to have a David Sylvester too.
Well...
You have one person who has had a stranglehold on the interpretation, and nobody has dared tread on that holy ground until now, when some of us have felt compelled to tread on it, to push a little, you know. What you've been saying all these years is not entirely true. Your interviews are marvelous. You have explained endlessly how Bacon functions, but in certain respects, you are now known to be wrong.
David Sylvester is the man one goes to when talking about Francis Bacon's work, or he just sits like a mighty rhinoceros over the work of Francis, what he's done in the past. So it was important to show it to him.
Barry Jewell did arrange for Sylvester to view the new work and says he was enthusiastic. In a lecture at the Tate in 1996, Sylvester even spoke about it with great interest.
Practically no other artist in history has so suppressed circulation of his works on paper. Perhaps he feared that knowledge of their existence might seem to invalidate his doctrine of the importance of improvising on the canvas. Or perhaps he was too modest to recognize the inherent quality of some of these works and saw them only as preparatory studies and therefore as no concern to anyone else. And it wasn't simply a matter of keeping quiet about it. He lied about it to the end.
The next step, now these things were coming out, and people were interested, would be to have an exhibition at the Tate. And all this works on paper, we'll call it, was splayed out on various tables. And various critics were invited to come, including the curators from the Tate, and David Sylvester.
Large number of trestle tables were put out. And I spent some of my time looking at the others who were there and watching them, having absolutely no reaction to it, not knowing what to do with it, not knowing whether to say, isn't this terrific? Was it safe to say it's terrific? Or should I say it's rubbish? Should I say it's genuine? Shall I, you know, like mice running around in sort of fear of a tomcat. Fascinating. Not even the director of the Tate had much to say about it. He, of all people, was certainly not going to commit himself one way or the other.
I thought, from David Sylvester's initial enthusiasm, that things would go smoothly, would march forth to an exhibition at the Tate. But when David Sylvester came in, the mood had changed. He seemed to be skeptical, seemed to be not the same euphoric David Sylvester that had first been struck by this material. Everyone looked at the pieces for 2 or 3 hours, and then everybody went home. There was no discussion, nothing. David Sylvester cut me out of his life. I couldn't get in touch with him. I couldn't make contact. He just fobbed me off saying, I will write to you.
David Sylvester later issued a statement which seemed to distance him from his initial enthusiasm, saying, I am amongst those who cannot see Bacon's hand on these pages. He declined to take part in this program.
Within a matter of weeks of these works being shown to the Tate Gallery and being dismissed, they were purchasing 40 sketches of a very similar stylistic nature, I might add, from the estate for 350,000 quid, 300,000 quid of it from lottery money. Now, when they were looking at those works, which were on free offer, the hugest archive relating to any 20th century British artist's work is on offer to the Tate Gallery, they're prepared to dismiss it on the say-so of, you know, 1 or 2 people.
Those were perfectly safe, you see. When the Tate buys something, it's like the curator of interpretation of the Tate said to me once, when I said, why the hell don't you buy paintings by young painters while they're still at school? And he said, oh, we prefer to pay £20,000 to somebody in Bond Street. Then we know they're all right. So the Tate's attitude to undiscovered material is that if it comes from an impeccable source, like some wrinkled old poet who knew Bacon for 40 years, then it must be safe. That we'll buy. If it comes from his friends who owned the house in Tangier at which he used to stay, that's all right. Yes, we can cope with that. But this huge quantity of new material, which is supposed to come straight from the studio, and we don't know anything about it, and we, you know, all these important critics have been to the studio and they've never seen anything like it. How can we be certain? No, leave it alone. Let somebody else prove that it's genuine.
We asked the Tate to give their opinion of Barry Jules' material, but they said it would be inappropriate to comment on works which they do not own.
It's been said by one Bacon authority, Mr. Sylvester, I believe, that the material undoubtedly emanated from Bacon's studio. That is, that's a rather curious phrase, since we know that Bacon didn't have a studio in the old master sense. There are no little pupils or apprentices who would be working away on little things while the master worked away on big ones. Sylvester does not believe in the Jewel Archive. Do I think it's a question of provenance? Yes, I do. And I think the whole question of the provenance is the most difficult.
I think anybody such as myself that comes along and upsets a very clean, pat theory of Bacon, that's the finished work, that's all there is, that's what counts, and discounts everything else to the point of firing mud at it, so it's effectively kicked to the back of the closet to gather dust. I'm not happy about it, obviously.
Can just bring your own round, yeah? Okay, don't go till I'm ready.
These stairs are a nightmare.
I tell you, I just hope this goes in your van.
Easy.
How's that motor of yours?
Oh, I got rid of that one. I've just got a new Golf.
Yeah? What's that say back?
I'll tell you later.
Want to see our great new way to get permanent hair color? Transform yourself with Hydrience, Clairol's first water-based permanent color cream. Using the gentleness of water, Hydrience saturates your hair with beautiful, permanent, rich color. First there was hair color, now there's Hydrience.
Get ready for the big kick-off with Football, the Sun's free 24-page magazine for the coming season. Dedicated to the people of Britain.
People have become obsessed by painting. They go to galleries in a way they never used to go because they're obsessed by the money that paintings make. They're absolutely haunted by that. After all, most people have no feeling about painting at all. They're not interested in art at all. Why should they be? Very few people are. They don't know the good from the bad, but they're influenced by the money.
Bacon was one of the first 20th century British artists to achieve an international reputation. He was represented by the powerful Marlborough Gallery, who helped turn the art market into a billion-dollar industry. In his lifetime, Bacon's paintings commanded prices of up to £4 million.
How do you get people to know about Bacon from Moscow to Minneapolis? It is by exploiting the personality through the press, through any medium you can get. And of course, if you have some quiet mouse tucked away in the country who is never seen by man or beast, painting marvelous pieces, this isn't quite the same as having Francis Bacon getting roaring drunk and being a kind of loudmouthed homosexual very publicly at a time when that is simply not permitted. You know, these are all aspects of the personality that a dealer, because a dealer is after all a publicist. If nothing else, he is a publicist, can exploit.
The Powerful Gallery is a large business organization. It has PR. It has modern PR. It not merely sends out press releases, but it contacts the right people. Its employees also schmooze with the right clients. They make the clients feel that they ought to have a Francis Bacon and that the price is, though high, an acceptable one. That kind of operation is very sophisticated today, but it had already begun 20 years ago. And Bacon was a beneficiary. He was prolific, but not too prolific. Though the pictures were supposedly difficult to live with, people who did live with them could feel somehow superior to people who couldn't. They could feel more sophisticated. They could feel more in touch with contemporary life. They could even feel, so to speak, tougher. And those glossy frames, those extremely shiny gold frames, and even the glass, which Bacon insisted on, those somehow made the paintings more acceptable to rich collectors. They were a form, I suspect, of enshrinement.
I think in the early work, the feeling is much more raw and real. You've got this wonderful cocktail. It's a cocktail of beauty and horror. You paint something that you fear, but you make it beautiful. That is a sort of thread that runs through Bacon's work, and that has become his trademark, if you like. But having said that, that's only one idea, you know, and he then repeated it. He repeated it, and he repeated it, and he repeated it, to the point where it becomes a cliché. They're empty rhetoric. It's as though he's presenting anguish in a very decorative, delightful, desirable form. They are desirable merchandise.
You know, it's interesting, in fact, if you look at the work, how his colour palette changes. And in the 60s, it actually becomes kind of quite groovy and vibrant, you know, kind of Mary Quantish almost. You know, there's like lovely lavenders and oranges and turquoises come into play. He was a great colourist. And people also forget that he was a sort of swishy queen interior designer. And I think that language is very present in the most serious of his kind of painting.
If you look at the paintings, all the backgrounds are tightly controlled. There's the frames, the decor, everything is very precise. And then the central image is like a sudden letting go, and the chaos comes in. And that must have been some rhythm in Bacon, going from total control to at least simulated lack of control.
I think one should never forget that Francis was a great gambler. And when I first knew him, he was earning his living giving these gambling parties, which would take place in his own studio, and Francis would be the croupier. And he approached his paintings very much in the spirit of a gambler. Was he going to win? He threw everything he had onto the table, as it were, and a great deal of the time he lost. He destroyed the paintings. But the successful ones gave Francis the same kind of gratification that he got in Monte Carlo when he made a huge killing. Later, when he could do automatically what he wanted to do, the quality went off. I mean, there was this sort of gambler's excitement to the images. I mean, was he going to bring it off? And that gave the painting, for me, a sort of extra excitement. There was this sort of built into it, was this sort of sense of failure. He was battling the odds.
He was a gambler. Maybe he was gambling. Maybe this archive, Jewel being summoned and told to get rid of the archive, was a gambler's throw on the roulette wheel, red or black. Will he destroy it? Will he open it? Will he open Pandora's box? If he opens Pandora's box, what will happen? It opens, I think, profoundly fascinating perspectives on Bacon's temperament if the archive is in fact the real thing.
So I visited his studio in Paris on a weekly basis, sometimes on a daily basis. And although I saw lots of photographs around with the odd splash of paint that had just dropped from his brush while he was working, or that had got mixed up from the painting table, I never saw anything like that. I don't really see Bacon, the Bacon I knew, spending his time, as it were, making mark after mark on photograph after photograph. I don't see where it was leading him. It seems to me very contrary to everything one knows about Bacon's working practice. But there can be surprises.
They're not signed, they're not dated, they're not inscribed. Though, in terms of documentary proof, I don't know. But I do know something about painting. And I recognize in those the qualities that I, shall we say, expect to find in a Bacon sketch. Time and time and time again, you look at these messed about photographs, to put no fine point on it, and immediately an alternative image comes into mind. And there's one here in which it's a very confused figure riding a bicycle. In his confusions of it, it seems to have one figure and 3 bicycles. An extraordinary thing to want to do. But when you get to the finished picture, something of that multiplicity of bicycles survives.
I just don't think they're at all relevant to the important work. You see, I think if Bacon had considered these things to be important, he would have shown them, which obviously he didn't do.
I don't know, I think they're his own business in a way, and I think they're irrelevant and not really of much importance. I mean, the important thing are the paintings where he is making that magic with the paint.
One feels strongly with certain works by Bacon that there's great pain involved in their making. And in some of the sketches which I saw in the Jewel Archive, I had a similar sense of pain and authenticity of feeling, which must be very difficult to simulate, and it's the reason why I'm convinced that those works are authentic. I think this is bona fide Francis Bacon work, which relates to the Van Gogh series, the Pope series, the Wrestlers, and there are sketches which seem to me to relate to all these different series of works from between 45 and, say, 1965. As I was looking through, I thought, nobody could possibly fake this. Why would anybody go to these ends of faking thousands of sheets, of faking work over all sorts of different periods, through different genres, through different techniques, for the sake of giving it to the Tate Gallery? But I can't help being circumspect and having lingering doubts and thinking that I may possibly be the victim of a Chattertonian hoax. I mean, if this is a hoax, it is one of the biggest hoaxes of the century.
Dealers are already suggesting that the Jewel Archive may be worth £2 million or more. But Barry Jewell says he does not want or need to sell. He does, however, hope to have the work exhibited. So far, museums and public galleries seem unwilling to commit.
I hope, ultimately, I am doing him a justice in allowing this material to be exhibited. I hope I can show where his struggle came from. And I hope this work that he did give me will do justice to his legend. And if I can help in a small way of carrying on this legend, I will be happy. And perhaps up there, Francis, sitting on a cloud with a glass of champagne, might be happy too.
There has been a history of Bacon fakes, of forgeries, and I can see Bacon's amusement at the whole idea. I remember we went together into the Marlborough Gallery where the people at the Marlborough were standing round with this fake Bacon, with a photograph transparency of a fake Bacon. And everybody sort of imagined he would explode with anger and sort of say, you must really make sure these things stop. And he took it and looked at it very, very carefully against the light. And there was a long silence, and he said, it's not bad. It's not bad at all. I think I'll use that staircase.
It's vultures in French.
Les vautours.
J'ai beaucoup de vultures qui descendent sur moi. What's birds of prey?
Des oiseaux de proie.
Des oiseaux de proie, j'en ai beaucoup qui descendent sur moi.
Qui descendent sur vous. Qu'est-ce qu'ils viennent chercher chez vous?
Ils commencent à chercher l'argent comme tout le reste du monde. Ils cherchent la viande. ce qu'il trouve, mais après, de temps en temps, il devient un peu détourné aussi, parce que nous pouvons de temps en temps les offrir une vie qui est plus amusante.